Welcome back inside the Stingray Show. We just finished up with Olin Buchanan of Texags Radio discussing this game from the Texas A&M side. Now, let's preview this from the home team. They are in South Bend, Indiana, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who are coming off of a loss in week one to the Miami Hurricanes, and then last week they had a bye week to prepare for the Texas A&M Aggies. Here is ESPN senior writer Adam Rittenberg, who covers college football and the Big Ten up there in Big Ten country, to talk about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Adam, how are things with you on the eve of the huge game there in South Bend, Indiana?
Yeah, great to be with you, Stingray. It's a fun matchup, right? Excited last year with that opener down in College Station, and then certainly this is one that I've had circled for a while. You just don't see Texas A&M up in this part of the country very often. They obviously have a great fan base, as you know, and expect to see a lot of Aggies there cheering on their team. And this is, the game has taken on significance, with Notre Dame losing their first game. Their backs are very much against the wall. This is a major opportunity for A&M to assert itself as a playoff contender. So, this is a game that I think we'll be talking about, weeks from now, maybe months from now, as a game that reveals a lot about both teams.
All right, if you would please recap what you saw in week one from Notre Dame there in Miami.
It was an interesting game. I think it did not go how I thought it would, not necessarily from a win-loss standpoint. I knew it was going to be a close game and it would kind of go either way. But I thought Notre Dame's defense would be a bit better. There was a lot of talk about their defensive front, and going into the season, it's maybe the best overall defense in college football, or one of them. And they still could be that. And this is an important opportunity this week, but they weren't that against Miami. Miami controlled the line of scrimmage. Miami made more plays on offense. I don't think Notre Dame feels great about how it pressured Carson Beck. So they need to be a lot better this week to be able to come out of there with the win. And then, the other subplot of that game was the lack of touches for Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame's Heisman Trophy contender, one of the most explosive players in college football. Only had 14 touches in that ball game and only 10 carries, I believe. So that's a number that needs to go up. And, Coach Marcus Freeman talked this week about how, there were a number of RPOs called for a first-time starting quarterback in CJ Carr. And, the numbers in the box, kind of suggested you keep the ball rather than handing it off. But they've got to hand it off more. And I think Marcus knows that. I think offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock knows that. And I would expect to see Jay Love having a much bigger role one way or the other in this game on Saturday night.
Now, Adam, when we flip and talk about Texas A&M, they have played two weaklings in Texas San Antonio and Utah State. However, when you look at the Texas A&M defense, they did allow 24 points against UTSA. Talk about Texas A&M's defense and what you've seen from the Aggies.
Right. A little bit harder to assess, as you mentioned, because of the competition, even though they've played twice as many games as Notre Dame. And I know that there's certainly optimism that this is going to be a good defense, but, look at who they lost. They lost two really good players on the defensive line, some other spots. So I think there's maybe more question marks on the A&M side, even though Notre Dame, we saw them struggle at times as well in their opener against Miami. So, Mike Elko knows what he's doing. Jay Bateman's a really good defensive coordinator. I think they're going to have as good of a plan as they can, especially going against a quarterback in CJ Carr, who I think showed us some impressive things in the Miami loss, but is still very much in the early stages of his development. So the looks that they give him, how they figure out ways to pressure him, how they figure out ways to take the ball out of Jeremiah Love's hands, because that's absolutely the game plan. Notre Dame is not elite at wide receiver. Eli Raridan is a promising tight end, but I don't think he's quite at the level of Michael Mayer types that have come through there from a tight end standpoint. Cole Kmet. So I think their game plan and their execution is going to be certainly an interesting thing, but they're going to have to play better, and Mike Elko knows it than they did in those first two ball games.
Where do you feel like that Notre Dame has the advantage over Texas A&M?
Well, yeah, I think being at home is a big one. I do think Notre Dame secondary, and Mike Elko highlighted that group is one of the best in college football. Has a chance to really show out in this game. Leonard Moore and Christian Gray and Don Schuler and some of those other DBs have been in big moments before, and I know Marcel Reed really wants to show that he's a top passing quarterback and not just an athlete back there. Notre Dame, meanwhile, wants to show that it's maybe one of the best secondaries in the country. So I think that's a potential advantage. And then I still look at that running back room that Notre Dame has, and there's very few teams that can counteract it. Now A&M also is very good at running back, but if you look at obviously Jeremiah Love, if you look at Jadarian Price, who would start for a lot of teams, and Aeneas Williams, who would probably start for a lot of teams, that's a pretty good group of running backs, stable of running backs. So if Notre Dame is playing the way it wants to, they will be running the ball more. They will be controlling the line of scrimmage, and their offensive line. These are two of the better offensive lines in college football. But again, I think Notre Dame didn't feel great about its overall line play in that opener. I've been talking to their coaches in the spring. It's a group that really has no seniors, but they believe they have more overall talent than even last year's group, which helped them get to the national championship game. So a lot of fun ones. I mean, the offensive line matchup, the quarterback matchup, these are two former Notre Dame defensive coordinators who are coaching these teams in Marcus Freeman and Mike Elko. There's just a lot to like about this matchup, and I hope it delivers on Saturday night.
All right, let's flip it. Where do you feel like that Texas A&M has the advantage over Notre Dame?
Well, right. I think, from what we saw in the opener, again, my opinion could change, but you saw what Miami's offensive line was able to do for stretches of that game. Really, until the fourth quarter, they were the aggressor. They were controlling Notre Dame's defensive front and keeping those guys out of the backfield, keeping them away from Carson Beck. And I know there's a lot of faith in this A&M offensive line is one of the better ones in the SEC in the country. So that's possibly an area they can really take advantage of and then get their running backs going because they're very talented at that position. So these are, this could be a run heavy game, and not so much involving the two quarterbacks. Although I know they both have that capability to attack downfield. They both have the ability to make dynamic plays. Obviously, Marcel Reed has shown what he can do with his legs, and I think CJ Carr is a pretty good athlete as well. But if you look at these two offensive lines, you look at these two running back stables, that's where I sense the game will evolve on Saturday.
All right, and Adam, you are going to the game there in South Bend. How do you see it playing out? Give us a prediction.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone back and forth on this a little bit. Ultimately, in Notre Dame with its back against the wall, an 0-2 start possibly, maybe probably eliminates them from the playoff. They're playing on their home field where they've been really good under Marcus Freeman. And I know they've had their early season struggles. In a sense, I think this early bye week, even though it's probably not ideal if you're a coach to have a week off so soon in the season, that should get them, healthy and refocused and really revived to play this game. So I think it'll be a close game, one possession type game, but yeah, man, it's hard to see Notre Dame starting this season 0-2.
All right, and Adam, one final game I want to touch on with you, and that one is not getting a lot of hype nationally. It is Wisconsin at Alabama tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. It is an early kick. Give us a breakdown of Alabama, Wisconsin.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is a game that, again, going in looks like it's going to be lopsided towards the Alabama side, and it was last year. But there was a quarterback injury in that game. I was at it last year up in Madison with Tyler Van Dyke, unfortunately sustaining a season-ending knee injury. There's unfortunately a quarterback injury again on the Wisconsin side with Billy Edwards Jr. Out for this game, and Danny O'Neal, who's a transfer from San Diego State, coming in. And even though I think Wisconsin is closer to what it wants to be on the offensive side of the ball with Jeff Grimes as a coordinator, Jeff obviously knows the SEC. He was at Auburn. He was at LSU earlier in his career, so he understands this type of challenge. But they, without Billy at quarterback, it's going to be hard for them, I think, to consistently keep up with an Alabama offense that I still believe has great potential to pile up points. So Wisconsin's played good defense so far. We'll see what they can do. Ryan Williams had a big game last year up in Madison. I know that Alabama talked this week about how it's pushing Ty Simpson and grinding him a little bit more. So I expect Alabama to win this fairly comfortably, setting up obviously that huge game with Georgia in a couple of weeks.
Okay. And as we walk out the door, who should be on upset alert in week number 3, in your opinion?
Well, again, we talk about desperate teams, and Florida certainly is that. And they're going to LSU this week. They won this game last year. LSU, wasn't overwhelmingly convincing in victory last week over Louisiana Tech, and so Billy Napier, this feels like a last stand type situation. LSU has to be cognizant of that, even though it has a terrific defense and they've upgraded on that side of the ball. That feels like a game that certainly could go down to the end. And then, I don't know. I mean, certainly it would be an upset because Tennessee rarely beats Georgia and hasn't beat Georgia at all lately. But you do wonder if Georgia, which again has not faced anybody of significance and certainly was sloppy at times on offense last week, whether this is the year that they go into Neyland Stadium. I mean, Josh Heupel, it's really amazing, Stephen. He was a guy that when he got hired, a lot of us were like, really? I mean, obviously there was a Danny White connection with their AD, but there was a feeling like, man, Tennessee hired Josh Heupel, and is he going to be able to win in the SEC? Is he going to be able to win big games? And boy, has he proven us all wrong. And so, I think at some point Josh is going to beat Georgia, and perhaps it's on Saturday night. So those two games are certainly ones I'll be watching.
Adam, look, man, I know that you were on a time crunch. Go and enjoy covering the game there in South Bend, Indiana, and we would love to catch up with you later on to continue our discussion of college football later down the line.
All right, sounds good, man. Enjoy the weekend.
All right, thank you, man. All right, so guys, that is going to wrap up the Notre Dame and Texas A&M preview show. I really do want to thank both Adam Rittenberg and Olin Buchanan for joining us on this edition of the Stingray Show.